Welcome to The Voice of Retail. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc. This podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Retail Council of Canada. Today, I'm thrilled to be sharing a full episode from the second season of my Conversations with CommerceNext podcast, featuring an interview with Sally Pofcher, a retail strategy expert and proven creator of growth and brand leadership. From McKinsey to Gap Inc. and beyond, Sally stands on a full and bright career at the forefront of innovative retail brands. She calls on her experience as a seasoned strategist, operator, and mother as she walks us through her role as CEO, turning around the Portland-based beloved children's fashion brand, Hanna Andersson. Sally talks with my Conversations with CommerceNext co-host Veronika Sonsev and myself about reaffirming brand values, strengthening company culture in changing and challenging times, and perhaps most importantly, the importance of being human. I launched the Conversations with CommerceNext podcast with my US-based partners to meet the top practitioners and thought leaders in the DTC and e-commerce marketing space and explore both their tradecraft and share the learnings from their career journeys. Let's listen in now as Veronika kicks off our conversation. And be sure and subscribe to my Conversations with CommerceNext podcast on Apple, Spotify, all the major platforms.
Well, welcome to Conversations with CommerceNext, Sally. You are leading the turnaround for a much-loved children's brand. We're super excited to have you on the podcast to learn a little bit more about Hanna Andersson and, of course, your own career journey.
Well, thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
And I'm joined here with the producer and co-host of Conversations with CommerceNext, Michael LeBlanc.
Hi, Sally. How are you today?
Terrific.
Now, where are we finding you today? What part of the world are you joining us from?
I am joining you from Chicago, which is not the headquarters of Hanna Andersson, which is in Portland, Oregon.
Love Chicago. And of course, as Veronika and Scott like to kid me about, I always try to find some kernel of Canadian in everything. I'm here in Toronto. And I was looking through your background and I see you were on the board of a Canadian Pet Value, right?
That is correct.
Fantastic.
That is correct. A great pet retailer. And I think we're probably sharing snowdrifts right now. I mean, I think the weather's kindred.
The weather is kindred and the cities are kindred. Toronto and Chicago, they feel a lot alike. So anyway, welcome. Great to meet you and looking forward to the conversation.
Well, Sally, you have had a very interesting career trajectory. You essentially started your career as a consultant, advising large retailers on growth strategies. Then you moved to an in-house executive strategy role at Gap Inc., and then into the CEO seat, first at PaperSource and now at Hanna Andersson. Would you consider this a traditional career path for a CEO?
Well, I don't know what makes traditional in an apparel or retail CEO, and I couldn't tell you whether they're like statistically outsized numbers. I think traditionally retail CEOs have come out of the merchant side of the house, or the merchant or store ops, and with a particular bias towards product or curation of assortment was at the core of what merchandising and retailers were about. And I think that had reached challenges over the year where there are a number of CEOs that came out of the merchandising side, may not have had the full suite of experiences in what are really complicated businesses. I mean, retail businesses always have the inventory, working capital complexity of managing inventory in dispersed locations and predicting trends of what people will buy and what to do with obsolescence of that, in managing dispersed employee bases and all of the things that go on with people and treatment of people and changing state rules and all of that, and supply chains and just the financial sophistication of managing a P&L and a balance sheet and changing digital and wholesale channels. So it's a hard gig. And I think there are rare phenomenons like Mickey Drexler at the Gap during that era that come out of merchandising and show an acumen for all of that. But I think there are plenty of executives that come out of different backgrounds. I think, I don't know the stats, but I don't think it's a large number statistically that are former strategists, but I personally feel like it's a great background. And I suspect that it is a large part of, even though nobody was searching for a strategist to go, like your first job in retail as a consultant is usually someone knocks you for being a consultant. But for me, I think it was great preparation because the work, over a decade at McKinsey that I had, is the foundation for how I know how to approach not just setting a strategy, but every part of the function. To me, it was a great experience. And you see people like Margot Georgiadis at Ancestry or Meg Whitman at eBay and Hewlett Packard or Mike George at QVC. They're great leaders. And this is just a small subset, out in some of the consumer sectors. So I think it's a really good background, but there are many good backgrounds.
So it sounds like that strategy background really kind of gave you an opportunity to look at all parts of the retail business, which is what prepared you to step into the CEO seat and really have a sense of how the whole organization needs to function together. Is that a fair assessment?
I think that's one part of it. I mean, I spent really formative, almost 10 years at McKinsey. So for me, it was the strategy, but it was also being in a place where the values of the caliber of people you're working with, like the idea of who you hire, who you work with, and how you talk to each other. I mean, at McKinsey, there's something called the obligation to dissent. And so having people help you with different ideas or understanding the implications of your ideas gets it out on the table. And it's actually it's not as common as I would have thought. Walking out of that into an environment like the Gap, having people speak not without agenda, but with less agenda about like, hey, that's an idea, but here's the consequence of it. How do we work that out? So that kind of people set of values and how people treat each other, that was, to me, very deeply steeped in what I saw at McKinsey between people, but also observing different leaders in how they led companies and how they treated each other and what things worked better or not. So that was a big part of it that was different. Yes, I mean, I probably spent more of my time on growth projects. So I spent more time thinking about strategies of how to rejuvenate a brand that has some old bones that are right, but aren't relevant or registering with new consumers or consumers growing into that age group. So thinking about how brands regenerate and rejuvenate themselves and the business system issues behind it. So it helped me look at all I don't want to use a dry term like your key performance indicators by every function, but it helped me kind of focus on how do you think through systematically how to drive growth, what gets in the way of aligning people and organizations and capabilities behind it. And then what are the other things you have to look at? Even if I'm not the head of distribution, I know which kind of key metrics to look at to know whether we're doing better and how to analyze, draw conclusions, communicate, like those foundational skills for being pretty good. And we saw things that didn't work either, like lots of presentations that didn't go anywhere. So that's pretty galvanizing too.
Definitely. I can see that there'd be so many. I always kind of, as a former consultant, I always say like seeing things across a portfolio of companies helps you kind of learn faster, and you kind of get a sense of you have a chance to try a lot of different things. So you have a sense to like you can iterate quicker because you see what's working and what's not working. Yeah,
at least you're practiced in solving problems, which is we're constantly not knowing the exact problem that we're solving, but it's more like, do you know how to approach a problem? Gather people around it and break it down and push through it.
For those who may not be familiar with Hanna Andersson, I want to kind of introduce them to the brand. And I'd love it if you could give us a brief overview of your product and what the brand stands for. I know you're really passionate about it.
Yeah. So Hanna has been around since 1983, so almost 40 years. So, and just as context, I'm the mother of 2 daughters in college and 1 in 4th grade. So I currently have a daughter that's wearing lots of Hanna pajamas. And then I have 10 and 12 years older daughters that had Hannas almost that feel like of another era. Hanna's been around for a while. And if I just back it up a bit to the beginning, because what it was in the beginning is a lot about what it is today. So Hanna was founded in 83 by this woman, Gun Denhard, who is a Swedish woman, came to the Pacific Northwest and was looking for the clothes that were like her Scandinavian roots, what she had grown up with, how she wanted to raise her kids, and didn't find them, so started the company. Like many things, a woman that didn't find what she needed started a company. And what's relevant to me, and my kids are a quarter Swedish, so I'm a big believer, and I studied in Denmark, so I really have no Scandinavian blood myself, but I'm so deeply bought in. I'm also 5 feet tall, so there's no question that I'm not Scandinavian. But I love everything about it. And so what I love about the value set that I think is true to Hanna and then so relevant today is, and you look at the Scandinavian countries are some of the happiest countries in the world. And there are a set of things that I think relate to that. there, all these family values around, if you can say hygge, like this term, which is spelled Hygge, but it's the idea of cozy familyness, things around how people gather and spend quality time together, open air living, the no bad weather, only bad clothes, and a lot about how raising kids with autonomy and sort of celebrating that childhood, a lot of interconnectivity about raising kids and protecting that independence of childhood. So a lot of these things that, in countries with a lot of darkness, there is a lot of happiness. So I think the Scandinavian values, where you go, like, what's that got to do with clothing? Well, that whole idea of clothes that are made for play, that are really comfortable, the kids are free, they're pretty timeless silhouettes, but they are fully, like, the other part of Scandinavian culture is this attention to design detail. So if you think of all the design within reach brands, the Arne Jacobsen, the Poul Hennessy lights, these classic iconic shapes, in clothing, the simplicity of the silhouette, but the attention to the details and things that are made to last is really at the core of these clothes. And that roots back to these whole sustainability set of values. And for Gun, Scandinavians, conservation of resources, few things handed down is sort of at the core of that value set. So Gun set about making clothes for her kids that were sustainably made, that were made for play, and that really were championing childhood. So we sort of talk about our mission to outfit the adventure of childhood, and the adventure of childhood being inclusive of the adventure that is the adventure for us as parents and family members. And we sell sleepwear and we sell kids apparel. And so we really outfit a baby anywhere from newborn to, our sizes go up to what is 150. And depending on the size of your child, that could be a 14-year-old, that could be a 10-year-old. And we have adult family matching pajamas for many holidays, and I'll talk more about it. But so what makes our clothing special is really, if you think about what people really connect Hanna. Like, I can think back and my hands go like this when I think of my daughter's clothing that are 22 years old, like the heft of the cotton. What I didn't know, which is like, why did my kids like those clothes? I always thought, oh, this is so hefty. I never wanted to, I could always hand them down to someone else. So I have a touch memory of them. But it's really all these other details, which my younger daughter would evangelize about the underwear. And it turns out lots of kids would make testimonials on the underwear because all of the elastic is an encased seam. All of the seams on the pajamas are enclosed and flat locked. All of the cotton is triple combed. And so there's a reason why kids that are really sensitive don't feel anything on their skin. And so there's just so many smaller details that I didn't ever even know about, but it's why kids are wearing their pajamas all day. Like, my daughter keeps wanting to wear them to school. So there's just a lot of things about the product. If I go back 40 years to like her principles, I mean, this clothing was made out of green cotton before anyone was talking about sustainability. That really was trailblazing. And so today, we have GOTS certified cotton. GOTS means that every aspect of your system has to be adhering to certain practices. You can see organic cotton in mass channels, and it may or may not be great cotton. It may not be produced in fair trade ways. There's a lot of attention to every step of that process, and we think the product in its best incarnation, just looks great on kids, and kids can put it on themselves and feel great. So obviously I just waxed on for a very long time, but there's lots of things I describe and you go, it's outdated, and yet it's absolutely perfect on the spot for where we are today. And if we just lived through a pandemic and are still through hopefully the end stages of that, where we've had our kids inside and we're fighting to keep them off of screens, we all know that outdoor living and being cozy inside and kids feeling good in their skin is, at the roots of what we want this to be about.
Well, for a retail strategist, you clearly have a love of product. I mean, that comes out pretty. You do. It really comes out. Let's speak just a little bit again for the audience that may not know or not know enough about you, how you go to market. So talk a little bit about. You've given us a nice, eloquent overview of the product. I want to talk a little bit more about that, but talk a little bit of how you go to market, where you can be found, where you trade, just a little bit of that kind of information.
Yeah. Well, it's really simple. HannaAndersson.com, and that's simpler and more simple than it's been in the past, because Hanna had its own stores in the United States, and we closed all of our stores in the early part of the pandemic, and we have not reopened them. and we have had, a great deal of success. We had some dislocation of helping our customers find that. There's been such a colossal shift to shopping online that has been accelerated in the pandemic, and even more true of millennial moms. And so we have a lot of opportunity to make our experience online even better and connect with new customers in the social forums where new moms learn about products. But at this point, Hanna Andersson is 100% distributed online through our own channel.
All right. And you ship, I noticed you ship internationally as well, right? Do you ship to Canada, for example? Do you ship around the world? Talk a bit about that.
We do.
You do?
We do. We have, we work with a partner to facilitate not the best expression, what will be a continually improving expression of the Hanna brand for international markets. And that is one of our biggest focus areas forward.
If you're enjoying this podcast, please be sure and hit that subscribe button on your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss another great episode. We'll be right back with our interview with Sally Pofcher from Hanna Andersson right after this message. Bloomreach is the world's #1 e-commerce experience cloud, empowering brands to deliver customer journeys so personalized they feel like magic. It offers a suite of products that drive true personalization and digital commerce growth, including discovery, offering AI-driven search and merchandising, content, offering a headless CMS, and engagement, offering a leading CDP and marketing automation solution. Together, these solutions combine the power of unified customer and product data with the speed and scale of AI optimization, enabling digital commerce experiences that convert on any channel and every journey. Learn more at bloomreach.com. That's bloomreach.com. Let's take a step back and talk about your tradecraft. So, as I listen to you, remind me of another fellow ex-McKinsey strategist, Hubert Joly, who went in and wrote a great book and, of course, did some great work at Best Buy. Let's talk about the work you're undertaking at the business system, as you call it, the business value system level. So 30, 40-year-old brand, you've been brought on board. You're obviously a change agent. You're coming on to take that business to different places. So talk about, when you first get there, you obviously have a system honed by years of doing this, of kind of breaking down issues and opportunities. Just walk us through a little bit about how you're approaching what and where the business is going and where it was. You talked about closing stores, but just give us a sense of the tradecraft about how at your level you walk into a business and say, this is what I need to do with it and when.
Yeah. Well, I joined Hanna in September of 2020, so relatively recently, and in a state of more than usual turmoil, and some amount of that very acute, like many retail businesses, to COVID pandemic specific. Nobody has worked in the offices of Hanna since March of 2020, closing all stores, the disruption of the supply chain. We produce quite a lot in India and Peru, who have been massively disrupted. But also on the heels of other disruptions in terms of a number of years where there are a couple of, sort of colossal events like an ERP implementation, a ransomware attack that really got in the way of visibility into product. Like if you can't ship, suddenly you actually don't ship. Right. Everybody's frustrated with the customer experience, and then you don't know what you would have sold, so you can't plan the next year. And these things happened almost 2 years apart, and so it almost disrupts 4 years of a clear line of visibility into what's the right offer for customers. How do we really put something out there, get feedback, and refine it? So there was a series of opportunities, both in terms of starting at the foundation of people, culture, how we together do something. I mean, there's a series of things you do as any CEO in any company, like what path are we going to take? What's the right strategy forward? Do we have the people around it? How we set a plan?
Do we have enough cash flow, right? I mean,
Well, I have the benefit, and Hanna has the benefit of, a really steady partnership in the private equity firm that is behind it. And so it wasn't as if there was not any view of like, here are the truths behind the brand. Like through this, there have continued to be great Hanna brand love. So net promoter scores, like the brand has had high regard, even with these disruptions. So there's still a healthy heartbeat. You could be sitting here, things going on, and yet the patient is still like there. And they're tremendously talented and committed people. And there are people also that have been at the brand that started with Goon back in the day when they were taking envelopes with dollar bills to get you to send a catalog. There are particularly the set of women that I call the keepers of the flame, never have wavered on protecting the product quality. There may be moments where you might not like a pattern that was brought out, for sure. But there was no moment where anyone compromised on the quality of the product and the make of the product. So throughout this, even if we were not shipping it on time, or we had moments where the graphic T-shirts had designs that might not have looked as sharp as they could have, there was certainly no compromise on the quality.
So good bones. It was a business with really good bones, solid brand.
Really good bones. But in need of kind of organizing leadership that connected people to the roles. And, so a lot of the things, were right away about reaffirming the brand, like who we are, all based in the truths that were already there, but getting clearer on that and sort of cutting out the clutter of, there's been a lot of discounting that has been a feature of or a function of, having the wrong inventory in the wrong places because didn't arrive in time and the wrong things were getting marked down. So stabilizing that, really refocusing, reconnecting the product team. And we brought in a lot of new design talent and under tremendous existing product leadership and product team members, and changed a lot about how we create new product. And the product that we've brought forward since then, even since summer of 21.
Yeah, I know the time just compresses, right? The
COVID
era.
I know.
2021, 22.
Yeah. We've just had really tremendous response to that. And so continuing to progress the product, we've really built a marketing team. I mean, for a brand, though we talk about Hanna as a brand, but Hanna has not been a company that's been brand led with marketers to help codify how you tell that story. But also people find out about brands totally differently than they used to. I mean, they're like telling a story on social media platforms, finding audiences, having influencers evangelize about you. It's just a different craft than marketing was for me 20 years ago, than it was 10 years ago, and even 5 years ago. So like bringing in the capabilities to both creatively and kind of from a performance marketing craft, tell the Hanna story, find new customers. We've got at this point, more than 500,000 new customers discovering us. But the baby market, every year new moms are born, and every year moms sort of age out. And so we have this, leaky bucket where we still have a really low awareness level, and we need to keep finding new people. So again, what we do, we took a year, building a marketing team. And now we're in the process of revitalizing and bringing in different talent to help us go from having built a functioning good website, where there's work that it takes to have Apple Pay, Afterpay, to have all of these platforms for reviews and uploading social photos. But there's a lot more we can do in terms of having it be inspiring and engaging and frictionless. And so working through all the things about our site speed and how people add things and how they respond to the way we show things, there's just quite a lot we can do to make it better. But we've been on that journey. And then the back of the operations, if we think of the things that have gotten in customers' way in terms of just getting a package in a timely manner, 2021 wasn't really the easiest year to get those things to be much better because we were working with as well-known, containers that cost 10 times as much and air freight that's stuck also in ground transportation here. And we had moments with FedEx where they weren't picking up express shipping. And we have hiring challenges in markets like Louisville where every distribution center is. So we had a lot to do to...
You had a lot of headwinds. So over and above the business challenge.
It was not frictionless, but what we did do was set goals and make progress on things so they're better and we know where we need to go. And then as a company and a culture, we had a lot to do and we have a lot to do. We've been working remote for a long time, which for some people is great, but it is, and I think from a business continuity standpoint, there have been marvelous learnings about how you can design a product line and see the images and line up on those things on screen. But in terms of connection and fun and cultural adherence to each other. I just think over time, it's not as connecting. And the few times I've been in the office and we've been together, I mean, I think the highlight of the year for many of us is we went to the warehouse in Louisville and we picked product and we were together.
We were together, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, when I talk to CEOs, they rank productivity like an 8 or 9 out of 10, but all those other cultural things around attention, attachment to the brand, those need a bunch of work.
Sally, we love to talk about kind of lessons that people learned in their career journey. We feel like, our audience is a lot of retail and e-commerce executives. You've had a very impressive career. Talk about the mistakes you've made, the lessons you've learned, and what advice you have for people who want to follow a similar career journey.
I could almost model this a little bit in that I've got 2 very different daughters, one who's graduating from college right now and the other one who's a sophomore, and they both kind of like consumer and retail businesses, and they're both, I think, marvelous and different people. So there's lots of different talents coming into retail and there's lots of good places. So I'm only one example of what people do. For me, if in my advanced age, I reflect on the good fortune I had to work at McKinsey even more than I realized when I was there, as this foundation of values and competency that I didn't know, right? And so, when we reference back why strategy a good background, like McKinsey was a really good background for me. Maybe strategy, but partly just this excellence in values. I happened to work with extraordinary people who I saw exhibit amazing people values. I never, as a woman, as a mom, I had 2 kids while I was there, as a developing intellect and problem solver and leader. I just was incredibly mentored. I learned how to structure problems and assert myself and be wrong. And that was great, and learn. So it's an aggressive apprenticeship process. I also got to see a lot of leaders and companies in their strengths and their dysfunctions, to see kind of what gets in the way of people really wanting to do something. Like, how do you get someone motivated to change? Or what's the difference between a presentation that says, if you move this lever by this amount, you could be this much better, which is the most annoying chart to receive from a consultant, because we all know as operators, like, yeah, okay, so how do we do that,
Right.
So what sets apart like a good executive, or like someone who's succeeding versus someone who's not? Like, what is that? What nugget?
Yeah. So that was for me, again, good fortune of like a good foundation. So by chance, my oldest daughter is going to work for McKinsey. My gosh, it wasn't even anything I thought about, but good foundation. For me, operating is the thrill. So everyone's different, but having been both a consultant and then spent some time as an operating partner at L. Catterton, for me, I've realized being close to the action and acting, being in the market, is where I get like the idea that you can make a choice, whether that's like a message you send to customers or it's a product you just try. It might be a product you try and other people didn't think was going to be great. And you're like, let's just buy 1,000 of them and see what happens. It's just different because it's like you can take small bets. And for me, the brand and the business is built by a series of actions in the marketplace, not by the concept of the actions in the deck. So that for me is a thrill. I went from big to small, and there are different moments where I could feel proud of that, or I could feel like, oh, I'm in a small company, like the number of zeros in this company. I talk in millions and not billions. I got products that are thousands and not hundreds of thousands. I worried about, in 2007 at PaperSource, I was doing things to save, $50,000 increments because that would save a job. So very different scale, and I have found that is enjoyable to me. So there may be moments where I go like, oh, I could, like people will be like, well, you're too small of a company to do this. Like, oh, but I like being close to the action. I like being close to product. And I'd come back to that. But I saw there are probably other big companies that I would like more, but I went to the Gap, and the time I was there had a lot of posturing and positioning that was in presentations and not a lot of things that were changing anything for the customer. And it was maddening. Like at the end of the day, like the things that address the opportunity have to be in contact with the customer. So I think like things that are kind of quirky, smaller, and less mass. But
you like to get things done. It's like that ability to push.
I bet you can. I bet you can in big companies. So I could be talking to myself, but for me, going small helped me get closer to the action. I love product and storytelling and creating, and I think at this point in my life, I wouldn't want to work for a company that made something or did something that I wasn't a passionate advocate of. It's a whole lot easier as a CEO when you can preach, blow wind in the sails of the company from a place of belief. And so I wouldn't want to do anything otherwise. I don't need to go sell widgets. And I really like, I have eyes that can see pattern and ask the why of the color palette and stuff. So, and I delight in the quirk of when we go hustle out a Pride collection with rainbow stripes that we've never done before, stepping into something new and seeing how people respond to it. Always for me, I was just talking to a woman last night that's considering, I think, is going to go work for someone I used to work with, and she wasn't sure about it. She doesn't know him as well as I do. I was like, always go walk into work with people that you are going to lock arms with on the mission. That's a good person to work with. If you could work with the people that you most like working with, they're good athletes and they get stuff done and you kind of like their energy, bigger than the jobs themselves, love your life. I would never want anyone I was talking, my lessons learned are also about always reinforcing that I have 3 daughters that are going to be the root of everything I do. I could get emotional here, but I don't miss too many mornings or nights or school events. I go to those things. I go on vacation always everywhere and be energized by the world at large. And my best self bringing to the company is the me that is imperfectly a mother and a friend and a voyeur of the world and not working all the time.
And I guess I want to kind of double click on that a little bit because, you've been CEO twice. You mentioned PaperSource, and we talked about Hanna. And you've also served on boards where you've been in the position where you've had to help a company pick the CEO. Yes. So what does it take to be a successful CEO? And from your perspective, how will that role change in 5 years? It's already changed a lot. How do you envision the retail CEO role changing in 5 years from now?
I guess the first question of picking a CEO, there are different endeavors. There are different kinds of states that you find a company in. So there are, whatever that cliche is, different horses for different courses. Depending on the brand and the type of problem, there are different profiles that need to, whether it's galvanizing product or energizing a team. Everyone has to do more than one thing, but sometimes you're in a very acute financial thing and you need someone to do, I think there's sort of a set of basics that are around someone that can actually crystallize a purpose and an overriding purpose that can be aligned to it, but can articulate it and rally people around it. It has to be about product for me. No matter what it is, even if it is the widget company or the bookshelf company or the speaker company, the product has to have a place in the marketplace that's, got a value proposition that's continually moving to be relevant. And no company stands still. So someone's got to always be able to find talent that's great or, energize that. My view is that CEOs set the goals and set the pace. So I'm if we're like a dog sled, I've got to be constantly pulling faster than anyone would pull naturally themselves, because all sorts of good executives will put a plan together of the plan that can be achieved. And my job is to set the marker higher for everyone. Partly informed by where we need to go as an enterprise, but partly just to keep people stretching outside of where they might naturally say, all right, here's what we can do next. So that sort of plan and then the pacing. And I just think there's different kinds of CEOs also for private equity-owned companies, public companies, private companies, because the stewardship of capital, the balance sheet as well as the P&L, is a different sport. And there are a lot of rising CEOs or people that want to be a CEO next, maybe have run a division, where the thing that maybe they don't know is how the use of cash and capital and the time value of that and the return profile is different, and the kind of discipline around that is a little bit different when you're in private equity type of ownership. And then ultimately, there's just kind of a general spark, whether you think someone's a driver.
All good advice. And you've definitely seen CEOs struggle over whether it's the use of capital or when companies go public, like dealing with investors. It's just, there's so many hiccups and so many things you've never done.
Yeah. And I probably should have said, but it maybe should never go without saying, a set of moral values, which you can't always get your finger on. Married with someone who really wants to win,
So culture still matters. I mean, the culture, and I know what you say about private equity and different people in different roles. We even see that today with Peloton news out today when we're recording this, right? The CFO becomes a CEO, and clearly they're going to go through some financial restructuring. Right.
Yeah. What's right for that moment. So, I mean, I think all some of those things, many of those things are evergreen. Yeah. I do think a lot of things are changing. They are probably the same undercurrents, but purpose matters more to millennials than it ever has in terms of choosing a place to work. And for all of us, like, we've just gone through 2 years of being inside and existentially questioning lots of things. So feeling like you're part of something that matters and that is good in some form. So someone that can find purpose, create purpose. In consumer businesses, getting to the consumer is harder all the time, right? We've got these high scale organizations. I'm picking my words carefully, right? But like Facebook itself, right? Probably Facebook and Google probably take 5 to 10% out of lots of consumer companies' revenue stream. Yeah. Probably, I'm not arguing that they're not earning it, because they're largely attributable, high performing ways of connecting with consumers. And yet, like, it's a high percentage of most people's marketing budgets. Amazon is a game changing way of delivering things to consumers at economics that, it's hard to hide the fact that it costs $8 to $10 to ship a package to consumers. At some point, this is getting harder and harder to just tuck away and free. And so I think there's like lots of new partnerships and bridges that are stressing business models. I think storytelling is continuing to evolve. How to tell a brand story, how to find consumers and let evangelists that don't look like your customers be evangelists.
Listen, you've put on a masterclass basically of brand and strategy, and I think we could I think we could have 3 of these episodes, Veronika. So let's book Sally back for.
That just said you've run long. But I also think that there's like employees are getting more complicated because they're spread out. I think we are not all as good as we're going to have to be on environmental stuff. And going from greenwashing to real, and that includes like where you locate stuff. Yeah. And if capital gets more expensive, right, which it's going to.
When, not if, it's going to get more expensive. All right. So you've opened the door to my last question, which is people. So I'm sure you're going through a big transition, trying to find and hire in people. Are you looking for people now? This is your opportunity to say for anyone listening, hey, this is a great place to work, and you can find jobs here. And
yes.
Couple of minutes on that.
Let's just say, I would start by saying, with all great respect for all the talented, Hanna, we're always looking. So whoever you are and whatever your talents are, if you're interested, reach out. Reach out, Wonderful. Find me, find our website, because things are always changing. People's lives change. People come and go. Right now, we are very rapidly and assiduously building our digital team, so our site merchandising capability, our customer analytics team, how do we know more so that we can, in the classic way of calling it CRM, like how can we help personalize customer journeys? How do we take what we know and do it better for consumers? We have a lot of content to create, so graphic designers and creative talent that tell stories in animated and motion ways. And there will always be places where our product teams, we have a lot of young talent that go out on maternity leave. So there are always places where our product team or our design team where talent's needed. So come our way.
And mostly, but not exclusively in Portland. Is that a fair statement? You also said you had distribution.
That was a perfect phrasing of it. Mostly, but not exclusively. We have a beautiful light-filled office in Portland, hopefully opening soon. But in the meantime.
The world is your oyster. All right. Well, listen, on behalf of Veronika, Sally, this has been a great interview and great spending time with you and getting to know both the business and you. So I want to thank you for being on Conversations with CommerceNext podcast. It was a real treat for me to get to know the brand. And thank you so much for articulating what you're going through. As I said, what a masterclass. And thank you again so much for your time. Thanks for tuning into this episode of Conversations with CommerceNext. Please follow us on Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, or your favorite podcast platform, where we will be sharing career advice and marketing strategies from e-commerce and digital marketing leaders at retailers and direct-to-consumer brands each and every episode. CommerceNext is a community, event series, and conference for marketers at retail and direct-to-consumer brands. Through our online forums, interviews, webinars, summits, and other in-person events, we harness the collective wisdom of our community to help marketers grow their businesses and advance their careers. Join CommerceNext events to meet other industry leaders and learn the latest e-commerce and marketing strategies. You can find upcoming events at CommerceNext.com. Have a fantastic week, everyone. Thanks for tuning into this special episode of The Voice of Retail. If you haven't already, be sure and click and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform so new episodes will land automatically twice a week. And check out my other retail industry media properties, the Remarkable Retail Podcast, Conversations with CommerceNext Podcast, and the Food Professor Podcast with Dr. Sylvain Charlebois. Last but not least, if you're into barbecue, check out my all-new YouTube barbecue show, Last Request Barbecue, with new episodes each and every week. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc, president of McKinsey LeBlanc Company and Maven Media. And if you're looking for more content or want to chat, follow me on LinkedIn or visit my website at mkleblanc.co. Have a safe week, everyone.